For 3 months, no one in Silvermoon Kingdom could calm the Alpha King's air at night, until a new maid walked into the room and whispered the one thing nobody else had noticed. The sound of a child crying echoed through the grand halls of Silvermoon Palace long after midnight. Servants moved quietly through the corridors, worried and uncertain, while the greatest healers in the kingdom searched for answers. Yet every night the same thing happened. The young heir of the Alpha King would wake beneath the moonlight, filled with sadness that no one seemed able to understand. At the center of it all stood William Hawthorne, the powerful Alpha King of Silvermoon Kingdom. To the world, he was a ruler who carried unmatched strength and responsibility. His name commanded respect across every territory. But behind the crown was a father who felt helpless because he could not understand why his own child could not find peace. The palace had tried everything: gentle songs, comforting voices, ancient remedies, and the care of experienced attendants had all failed. The whispers among the servants grew louder. Some believed the air carried a mysterious burden. Others thought there was a secret hidden from the kingdom. But nobody had found the truth. Then Emily Carter arrived. She was a new maid entering the palace with nothing but a small bag and a quiet determination. As an Omega, she was not welcomed with excitement. Many servants looked at her and immediately decided she did not belong among the royal halls. They saw her position before they saw her character. They saw a maid before they saw the person she truly was. Emily did not argue with their opinions. She had learned that kindness did not need to announce itself. She simply worked, listened, and treated everyone with the same respect. On her first night assigned near the royal chambers, Emily heard the familiar crying that had troubled the entire palace. The other maids warned her not to interfere. "The healers already tried everything," one servant told her. "There is nothing you can do." But Emily did not walk away. Not because she believed she was more capable than anyone else. She simply heard something others ignored. The crying was not the sound of pain. It was the sound of loneliness. Standing outside the room, Emily closed her eyes and listened carefully. She noticed the small details everyone else had missed. The quiet pauses. The change in the child's breathing. The way the room felt colder than the rest of the palace. Slowly she stepped inside. For the first time that night, the crying began to soften. Hidden behind the doorway, William watched in surprise. The Alpha King had seen countless people try to help his heir. But this young Omega maid was different. She was not using authority. She was not seeking attention. She was simply paying attention. And in that quiet moment, something changed inside Silvermoon Palace. The Alpha King did not know it yet. But the new maid he almost overlooked was about to uncover a secret that would change his family, his kingdom, and the future of everyone who called Silvermoon home. The next morning, the halls of Silvermoon Palace felt different. The whispers that had followed the Alpha King's heir for months had not disappeared. But something had changed during the night. For the first time in a long while, the palace had experienced a moment of peace. William Hawthorne stood outside the royal chambers, quietly watching the room where his child rested. He had spent countless nights searching for an answer, yet the solution had appeared from someone nobody expected. Emily Carter, the new Omega maid, had not brought special medicine or ancient knowledge. She had simply listened. That was what continued to surprise him. Most people entered the royal chambers with fear or with the desire to impress the Alpha King. Emily had entered with patience. She treated the heir not as a symbol of power, but as a child who needed to be understood. Throughout the morning, the palace servants watched her carefully. Some were curious. Others remained doubtful. They could not understand why someone with such a low position had succeeded where experienced attendants had failed. Emily ignored their opinions. She continued her duties quietly, cleaning the royal rooms and helping wherever she was needed. She never acted as if she had accomplished something extraordinary. To her, she had only done what anyone with compassion should do. Later that day, William requested a private conversation with her. Emily entered the grand study with a calm expression, surrounded by ancient books and royal decorations. The Alpha King looked at her carefully, trying to understand the person behind the simple maid uniform. "Why did you stay when everyone else believed there was nothing more to do?" William asked. Emily lowered her eyes respectfully before answering. "Because I did not think the heir needed someone to solve a problem. I thought he needed someone to understand what he was feeling." Those words remained with William. For years, people had approached him because of his title. They respected the Alpha King, but few saw the person behind the crown. Yet this young Omega Maid had noticed something others overlooked. She had seen a quiet sadness hidden beneath a royal responsibility. William did not know why, but her words felt different from every piece of advice he had received before. Meanwhile, Emily continued caring for the young heir. She noticed small details that revealed more about the child's feelings. The room was decorated beautifully, but it felt empty. The servants provided excellent care, but they followed routines instead of emotions. Emily understood that comfort came from connection, not just attention. That evening, as the moonlight entered the royal chamber, Emily sat nearby and softly spoke to the child. She shared simple stories about the village outside the palace walls, about flowers growing in spring, and about the peaceful forests beyond the kingdom. Slowly, the room became quiet. William watched from the doorway, unable to hide his surprise. The same child who had cried night after night was finally resting peacefully. But what shocked him most was not that Emily had helped. It was the feeling that she understood something deeper about his family than anyone else in the palace. And as the Alpha King looked at the Omega Maid who had changed the atmosphere of his home, he began to wonder if her arrival was not a coincidence. Perhaps Emily Carter had entered Silvermoon Palace for a reason that even she did not yet understand. The days after Emily Carter's unexpected success inside the royal chambers brought a quiet curiosity throughout Silvermoon Palace. The servants who once overlooked her began watching her more carefully. They wanted to understand how a new Omega Maid had managed to bring peace to the Alpha King's heir when so many experienced attendants had failed. But Emily never noticed the attention. She continued her work with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. Every morning, she entered the royal chambers with a gentle smile and a calm presence that seemed to change the entire atmosphere. William Hawthorne noticed the difference more than anyone. The Alpha King had spent years surrounded by people who feared disappointing him. They followed orders, respected his title, and carefully chose every word they spoke. Emily was different. She respected him, but she did not treat him as someone unreachable. She spoke with honesty and kindness, and somehow that made the walls around the Alpha King feel less heavy. One afternoon, William found Emily sitting near the garden outside the royal wing, preparing small bundles of herbs for the healers. The sunlight reflected across the flowers, creating a peaceful scene far from the pressure of the throne room. "You seem to understand my child better than anyone here," William said as he approached. Emily looked up with a surprised expression. "I think he understands everyone else. People simply forgot to listen." Those words made William pause. He had spent so much time searching for a solution that he had forgotten to ask a simpler question. What was the child trying to communicate? Emily explained that the air reacted differently to certain sounds, certain rooms, and certain moments of the day. She believed the child was not struggling because something was wrong with him. She believed he was trying to express something nobody had noticed. William listened carefully. For the first time, he was not listening as a king searching for an answer. He was listening as a father. That evening, Emily returned to the royal chamber and observed the room more closely. The decorations were beautiful, the furniture was expensive, and everything appeared perfect. But she noticed something unusual. Near the corner of the room was an old wooden cradle that seemed different from everything else. It carried a familiar scent, almost like a memory from another time. When Emily gently touched the blanket inside, she felt something she could not explain. A quiet connection. A feeling that the child was responding not only to her presence, but also to something connected to his past. Before she could understand it fully, William entered the room. He noticed her expression and immediately realized she had discovered something. "What is it?" he asked. Emily hesitated. She did not want to make assumptions about the royal family, but her instincts told her that the answer was hidden somewhere close. "I think your heir is not crying because he is troubled," Emily said softly. "I think he is searching for something he remembers." William looked toward the cradle, his expression changing as old memories returned. There were things about the child's early days that few people knew, things the palace had chosen not to discuss. As the Alpha King stood silently, Emily realized that the tears she had been trying to understand were connected to a secret buried within Silvermoon Palace itself. And for the first time, William wondered if the new maid had not simply helped his child. Perhaps she had uncovered the truth that everyone else had been unable to see. The secret hidden inside Silvermoon Palace had begun to reveal itself, and William Hawthorne could no longer ignore the questions surrounding his heir. For years, the Alpha King had believed that the child's nightly cries were a mystery that would eventually disappear with time. But after watching Emily Carter, the new Omega Maid, understand what everyone else had missed, he realized there was a deeper story waiting to be uncovered. The old wooden cradle in the royal chamber carried memories that few people in the kingdom knew about. It had belonged to a time before the palace became filled with silence and careful traditions. Emily stood quietly beside it, sensing that something important was connected to the object. She did not know why, but the feeling was familiar. It was as if the room itself was holding on to a memory. William noticed her expression and slowly approached. "That cradle has been in my family for generations," he explained. "But nobody has been able to understand why my child reacts to it." Emily looked at him carefully. "Maybe he is not reacting to the cradle itself," she said. "Maybe he is reacting to what it represents." Those words made William think about the past. Before he became the Alpha King, before the responsibilities of leadership surrounded him, there had been moments of warmth and happiness inside the palace. But after certain events changed his life, many memories were placed away and rarely spoken about. Emily did not know the details, but she could feel that the child's connection to the past was important. The following day, William allowed Emily to explore the royal archives. It was a place filled with ancient records, family histories, and forgotten stories from previous generations of Alpha leaders. As Emily searched through the documents, she discovered references to a rare bond between certain Omega bloodlines and Alpha heirs. The records described Omegas who possessed a unique ability to sense emotions that others could not understand. They were not powerful because of authority. They were valued because they could bring peace where others found confusion. Emily was surprised by what she read. She had never known that her own nature could be connected to such an old tradition. Meanwhile, William stood nearby, reading the same records with a different feeling. He had always believed that strength came from protecting his kingdom through power and responsibility. Now he was beginning to understand that strength could also come from compassion and understanding. As evening arrived, Emily returned to the royal chamber. The young heir was awake but calm. She sat nearby and quietly spoke, not trying to force anything, only offering comfort. William watched from the doorway as the child reached toward Emily with trust. For the first time, he saw a connection that could not be explained by ordinary reasons. The Alpha King realized that Emily had not simply helped his child sleep. She had awakened a bond that had been forgotten for generations. But with every answer came another question. Why had this connection appeared now? Why had an Omega Maid arrived at the exact moment his family needed her most? Deep within Silvermoon Palace, an old secret was beginning to return. And Emily Carter was slowly discovering that her arrival was not an accident. It was the beginning of a destiny that had been waiting for her all along. The discovery inside the ancient archives changed the way William Hawthorne viewed everything around him. The Alpha King had spent years believing that every challenge could be solved through preparation, knowledge, and control. But now, standing beside Emily Carter, he was beginning to understand that some answers could only be found through trust. The young Omega Maid had uncovered a connection that generations of royal scholars had overlooked. She had not searched for recognition. She had not expected a reward. She had simply followed her instinct to understand a child who needed someone to listen. As the days passed, Emily continued caring for the Alpha heir, and the bond between them grew stronger. The child who once struggled to find peace now became calmer whenever she entered the room. The servants noticed the change, and soon the entire palace began talking about the mysterious connection between the new maid and the royal heir. Some were amazed. Others were uncertain. Many could not understand how someone with such a humble position could hold such importance inside the royal family. Emily remained unaffected by the attention. She knew that kindness was not valuable because others praised it. Kindness mattered because someone needed it. William watched her closely, and every day he discovered something new about the woman who had entered his palace unexpectedly. He noticed that Emily never treated the heir like a future ruler. She treated him like a person with feelings, fears, and hopes. That difference stayed in his mind. One evening, William invited Emily to walk through the private gardens behind the palace. The gardens had belonged to previous Alpha Kings and were considered a place where leaders reflected on important decisions. As they walked beneath the soft evening light, William finally spoke about the burden he carried. "Everyone sees the Alpha King," he said quietly, "but very few people see the father behind the title." Emily looked at him with understanding. Sometimes people with the greatest responsibilities are the ones who need someone to listen the most. William stopped for a moment. Those simple words affected him more than he expected. He had spent years protecting his kingdom, but he had forgotten that he also needed moments where he could simply be human. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading among the noble families. Some questioned why an Omega Maid had access to the royal heir. They believed tradition should decide who was allowed to influence the future of the kingdom. But William began to question those traditions himself. He remembered how many times people had judged Emily without knowing her heart. He remembered how quickly they dismissed her because of her position. And he realized that those same beliefs had prevented them from seeing the truth sooner. That night, Emily discovered another detail hidden within the ancient records. The Omega bloodline mentioned in the documents was connected to a forgotten promise made between the Alpha family and certain guardians of the kingdom. The records suggested that when the next great change arrived, an Omega with a compassionate heart would appear to guide the Alpha heir toward balance. Emily was stunned by the discovery. She had never imagined herself as part of any ancient story. She had only wanted to help a child who was hurting. But William understood the meaning behind the words. The arrival of Emily Carter was not random. It was a moment written into history long before either of them knew. And as the Alpha King looked at the Omega Maid who had changed his family forever, he realized the greatest mystery in Silver Moon Kingdom was no longer why his heir cried at night. It was why destiny had chosen Emily to be the person who finally understood him. Alpha King Kalen Ironwood remained at the entrance of the hidden cave, unable to move as he watched the golden light fade from Sarah's hands. The small wolf pup rested safely against her chest, breathing softly now, unaware that the world outside had been searching for him. Sarah lowered her head, exhausted, her fingers trembling as she whispered, "You are safe now." She did not know who was watching. She did not know that the stranger standing in the shadows was the ruler whose name had filled every pack with fear and respect. To her, he was only someone who had witnessed a fragile moment she never wanted anyone to see. Kalen had followed his son through 3 days of uncertainty, expecting to find danger, betrayal, or another reason to distrust the world. Instead, he found an Omega who had been rejected by her own pack, yet still chose kindness when no one had shown her any. His expression softened as he stepped forward. The sound of his footsteps made Sarah turn quickly. Instinctively, she held the pup closer, her body shielding the little wolf before she even understood what she was doing. "Do not be afraid," Kalen said quietly. His voice was deep, but there was no command in it, only gratitude. Sarah studied him carefully. She noticed the expensive cloak, the calm authority in his posture, and the way the air itself seemed to recognize his presence. "You were there," she whispered. Kalen stopped. "You saw everything." He did not deny it. "I saw you protect a life that everyone else ignored." Sarah looked away. Anyone would have done the same. The words surprised him. In a world where power was praised above compassion, she spoke as if her own actions had no value. "No," Kalen answered softly. "Not everyone would." The pup stirred between them, and Sarah immediately checked on him. That simple movement revealed more about her heart than any title or ability could. Kalen approached slowly and knelt a short distance away, lowering himself so she would not feel threatened. "That wolf is not ordinary," he said. Sarah looked down. "I know he is special." But he was still hurt. Those words stayed with him. She did not care about his bloodline, his strength, or what reward she might receive. She cared that someone small needed help. For the first time in years, Kalen felt something beyond duty and responsibility. He felt hope. Outside the cave, the first rays of morning light touched the forest, painting the trees in silver and gold. Sarah looked toward the entrance, unaware that the greatest secret of the Northern Territories stood before her. Kalen knew the truth could not remain hidden forever. Soon, The world would learn that the forgotten Omega who everyone overlooked had saved the Alpha King's son. But before that moment came, he wanted to understand the woman who had done what no warrior, healer, or noble had ever managed to do. She had reminded him that true strength was never measured by power alone. It was revealed through compassion when no one was watching. Sarah had never expected anyone to notice her kindness. For years she had lived as the Omega everyone overlooked, the one people remembered only when there was work to be done or blame to be placed. Yet now, inside a quiet forest cave beneath the morning sky, the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories was looking at her as if she was something rare. She lowered her eyes, uncomfortable with the attention. "I only did what was right," she said softly. Kaelin Ironwood studied her carefully. There was no pride in her voice, no desire for praise. Only a simple belief that helping someone in need was natural. That alone made her different from everyone he had known. The Alpha King stepped closer and gently reached toward the small wolf pup. The moment his hand touched the silver and gold fur, the little creature opened its eyes. A familiar warmth passed between them. Sarah watched the scene quietly, realizing this was not just a lost animal. "He knows you," she whispered. Kaelin looked at his son, then back at her. "Yes," he answered. "He does." Something in his voice made Sarah pause. There was pain hidden beneath those words, the kind that came from carrying too many responsibilities alone. She had heard stories about Alpha King Kaelin Ironwood. She had heard people describe him as untouchable, distant, and impossible to understand. But standing before her was not a legend carved from stone. He was a father who had spent days searching for his child. He was someone who had been afraid of losing someone he loved. "You were searching for him the entire time," Sarah said. Kaelin nodded. "Every hour." A quiet silence filled the cave. For the first time, Sarah saw the person behind the crown. Not the ruler. Not the warrior. Just a man who cared deeply. "Why did you not reveal who you were?" she asked. Kaelin looked toward the forest beyond the cave. "Because I needed to know if someone would help without expecting anything in return." Sarah understood. The world had taught her that status changed the way people treated each other. A king received kindness because people wanted something, but an injured wolf pup received kindness only from someone whose heart was genuine. "And now you know," Sarah said. A small smile appeared on Kaelin's face. "Now I know." The words carried more meaning than she expected. Outside, the forest began to awaken. Birds called from the trees, and sunlight spread across the path that had been hidden by darkness. Kaelin carefully lifted his son, but before leaving, he stopped and looked back at Sarah. "You should come with us." Sarah immediately shook her head. "I cannot." The answer was quick, almost automatic. "My pack does not want me. I have no place among powerful wolves." Kaelin's expression changed. He looked at her with quiet certainty. "Perhaps the problem was never that you had no place." Sarah looked up. "Perhaps," he continued, "you were simply standing among people who failed to recognize your worth." Her heart tightened at those words. She had spent years believing she was less than everyone else. Hearing someone challenge that belief felt unfamiliar. Kaelin turned toward the cave entrance, but his voice remained gentle. "The world will soon learn what happened here. When it does, remember this. You were not chosen because you healed my son. You were respected because you showed your true heart before anyone knew your name." Sarah watched him walk into the morning light, carrying the wolf pup safely in his arms. And for the first time in many years, she wondered if her story was not ending in rejection. Maybe after all this time it was only beginning. The journey back through the forest felt different for Sarah. The same trees that had once hidden her tears now seemed brighter beneath the morning sun. She walked beside Kaelin Ironwood in silence, still trying to understand everything that had happened. Only hours earlier, she had been a rejected Omega with no place in her pack. Now she was walking beside the Alpha King himself, carrying a secret that could change how everyone saw her forever. But Sarah did not feel powerful. She still felt like the same girl who had spent years staying quiet, hoping not to become a burden to anyone. Kaelin noticed her silence. "You are thinking too much," he said gently. Sarah looked surprised. "How did you know?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Because you look at the ground whenever you are worried." She lowered her eyes and realized he was right. It was a habit she had carried for years. I am not used to people noticing me, she admitted. Kaelin stopped walking for a moment. Then the people around you were not paying enough attention. Those words stayed with her. When they reached the edge of the Northern Territory, the royal guards were already waiting. The moment they saw Kaelin carrying the young wolf pup, their expressions changed from concern to relief. But when they noticed Sarah beside him, curiosity spread through the group. They knew who she was. They knew the rumors about the rejected Omega from Thorn Valley. Yet Kaelin did not allow those rumors to define her. "This is Sarah Whitlock," he announced calmly. "She saved my son when others would have walked away." The guards bowed their heads in respect. Sarah froze. She had spent years being ignored. She had never imagined people would look at her with honor instead of pity. But the greatest surprise came when the royal healer approached. After examining the young wolf pup, the healer turned toward Kaelin with disbelief. "The recovery is beyond anything I have seen," she said. "Whoever helped him possesses a rare gift." Sarah immediately stepped back. "It was not a gift. I just wanted him to live." Kaelin looked at her, and that answer confirmed what he already knew. Her strength came from her heart, before it came from any mysterious ability. As they continued toward the royal lands, Sarah saw the kingdom for the first time. The towering stone walls, the wide pathways, and the banners moving beneath the sky all seemed impossible. Yet the thing that surprised her most was not the palace. It was the kindness of the people who greeted their king. They did not look like the monsters described in old stories. They looked like a family waiting for someone they trusted to return. That evening, beneath the silver glow of the moon, Sarah stood outside the palace gardens. She touched the small mark left by the healing light on her hand and wondered what her future would become. Kaelin joined her quietly. "You still think you do not belong here," he said. Sarah smiled sadly. "I do not know where I belong." He looked toward the moon above them. "Sometimes destiny does not take us where we expect. Sometimes it brings us to the place where we finally understand ourselves." Sarah looked at him, seeing not a king above her, but someone who had seen her when the world looked away. And in that quiet moment, she realized something had changed. She was no longer the Omega waiting to be accepted. She was Sarah Whitlock, the woman whose kindness had reached the heart of the Alpha King, and reminded an entire kingdom that true strength was never about power alone. It was about compassion, courage, and the choice to care when no one else did.